Josh Schimmick versus Karen and
No
Carlos.
versus. It's a discussion with friends.
Political Process versus Agora.
So I could start out with something that might clear a lot of the air first. So when I was talking to Congressman back in the 70s, I said, well, how can we not be political? We have to talk to people. He said, oh, he says, yeah, politics is talking and interacting with people to try to persuade them. Parliamentary politics is to persuade them to vote and use their power over other people. So I'm very, very involved in politics and talking to people to persuade them about ideas. So if people in the Libertarian Party gave up trying to run candidates for office, they wouldn't give up trying to convince people that their ideas were good.
Well, here's the thing that you may not have considered. I've run for office multiple times. If someone is running to dismantle aggression, I don't see how that could possibly be bad. That's not exercising power over other people. That is trying to get into a position to dismantle power over other people. But there's a more important reason than that. If you run a Senate campaign, say, and I'm going to be throwing out round numbers, they might not be exact in every state, but if you run a Senate campaign, even if you put only $100 onto your campaign, you end up getting about $100,000 worth of publicity, and people will hear what you have to say that for nothing. It doesn't cost you anything, at least in Colorado, because we don't have to petition in Colorado, so maybe my perspective is very Colorado specific. We don't have to petition, we don't have to pay a fee. You just get nominated at convention, and all of a sudden, every newspaper in the state wants to talk to you. They did that with me, and I was able to spread a message that people who normally wouldn't go to these alternative societies got to hear, and it did not cost me a thing. You have different doors open to you when you run a candidate. I'm not the type of person who says that everyone's doing something else should be doing what I'm doing, because I do think everyone has their own talents, and I don't think it's productive to tell people that what they're doing, they should be doing something else. Because I think we're all very rational. We listen to people. We can start to decide what's best for us. I would never have become a libertarian without the political process. That was my introduction. I know hundreds and hundreds of people that are that way. I don't see why we would want to foreclose something that is bringing people in. Part of the ultimate problem that I agree with you is some of our candidates are not aggression abolitionists. And I think we need to get better as a party and no to the fuck out of those people. That we need to only run people that are going to be actually putting forth a pure libertarian message. And I'm not saying that they need to promise it can go from zero to nothing overnight, but they always need to say the end goal, as Murray Rothbard said. You can talk about steps along the way, but you always hold high the banner of pure principle. So I actually think for those of you who are in the Agora, that's wonderful. But those of us who are doing the political work are driving people to you. And we're driving people to you through areas you're not going to reach them. And that we should be working together rather than trying to convince each other. But I'm actually going to try to make a pitch towards you. Not to get involved into politics the way I am. But realizing that we bring people to you, and anyone out here who's not currently involved in the LP. I'm not asking you to get involved, but I am asking you for something. Become a member at $25 a year so that people like me will drive people to people like you. That is my ask of you.
Thanks. Well, there's a lot of things that are like justifications for becoming involved in the political process. So you restated what David Nolan said early on. He said, well, we don't ever expect to get anybody elected. We just want to help educate people. And, we'll use the publicity that we'll get by being a party. And so Conka's answer to that I heard in a debate he had with Gary Greenberg early on. And Gary Greenberg, now we're talking 73, 74 time frame. Gary Greenberg was in New York City.
Yep.
So that was a time when they ran a candidate for mayor of New York City. The party then in New York was called the Free Libertarian Party of New York. So, so Gary Greenberg claimed to be an anarchist, but he said, again, sort of like Dave Nolan said, you have to educate people. So Conklin's answer is this: you're educating them to the wrong thing. You're educating them to statism. You're educating them that we have to become involved in the state. We have to justify the state. We have to give it our lifeblood and energy by giving it our vote. There's an old anarchist saying that the ballot is a bullet. What that means is, by giving it a ballot, dealing with the Lockean theory of government, he says the only legitimate government is due to the consent of the government. So when you give a vote, you're giving a consent to their very existence. And you're saying, all right, I'll participate in the process, I believe in it, and I'll abide by the outcome, and I won't complain about it, though, because everybody complains about it. And so, to anarchists, they'll say, well, you didn't vote, you don't have a right to complain. And the exact opposite is true. The anarchist is the only one that has a right to complain, because the people that vote are the ones that don't have a right to complain about the outcome, because they gave that process their energy. They said, your system is good, your system is legitimate, I'll participate in it. So anyway, that's the education justification for having a political party and call yourself still a libertarian. There is a couple of cases where I have gotten involved in the political process, but it was to remove the mayor of my town from power. And I got on the radio, I did all the things that you do, but I called it an anti-political process. I organized people in the town that circulated petitions to say, this guy's a bum, get him out. And people, when I was doing the radio program, people would say, well, you should run for mayor. And I said, no, you don't understand. I'm against this position of power even existing, Anyway, I didn't make that argument on the radio so much. I wanted to see us get this guy out, and we did. The second largest city in New Hampshire was Nashville. The other thing about, the reason I don't publicly criticize, say, somebody like Ron Paul, who's running for president. I would talk to people I knew that were out there spending all their time and energy supporting Ron Paul. And I said, hey, I'm not going to publicly oppose you. Like, who's going to be against Ron Paul? He's such a nice guy. He's like your uncle, your grandpa, or whatever. And I said, you guys are going to bring people in that we can convert into being libertarians, like you're saying. The point I've made a couple of years before that people may not have liked is that the Libertarian Party is not libertarian because it's a party. So, for example, I could start a car dealership, and my name is Jack, but I could call it Bob's Cars, because that's a proper name. So Libertarian Party is a proper name for a bunch of people that get together and they want to call themselves libertarians to persuade people to do something like vote. And it is true that you'll get publicity from that, but here's one of the things that happens from becoming involved in a political party, which essentially in 50 years hasn't gotten anybody elected, is that you will burn people out.
I'm just going to put a pin in it.
I'm going to continue talking because I still have the floor.
Yeah, you do.
And so I've seen it over and over again. The only things you have to get to the movement, and Conklin points this out, is your time, your money, and your energy. And so if you spend all your time, money, and energy, I'm an engineer, so I would draft that. That's like a cost. And you don't get elected in the end, so you get no reward. And then you run again, and you spend your time, your money, and your energy. And you keep getting lower and lower in your personal assets. And being involved in the Agora, like let's say you invent some new cryptocurrency and you become a bazillionaire or whatever, there's a reward for being involved in the marketplace, for being involved in the Agora, for creating products, services that are in demand to help people be free. That makes differences.
I think you contradicted yourself at multiple places, so you wouldn't publicly criticize Ron Paul. Well, I am suggesting that the party become a lot more like Ron Paul, just with more, because we are driving people into liberty that would never be used before. Hey, we have got people elected, and David Nolan didn't say you'd never get anyone elected. He put P.S. along the way, we might get some libertarians elected. That's in the case for a libertarian political party. If you could tell them the party whole story. So, in fact, we did get, I know people like to say we did not get a libertarian elected to federal office. Before we had ballot access in every state, we in fact did. John Sims out of Idaho was I believe an apple farmer. He was an anarcho-capitalist. If that's not a libertarian, I don't know who isn't. We just didn't have the party label in that state. You are saying, well, you get a certain reward from being in the Agora. Well, that's for you, though. I might not. We can't tell the other people where they're going to get their reward. I'm not a merchant. I'm a consumer. I'm not going to get much reward out of the Agora because I'm not going to start a business. That's not me. I'm a talker. I'm an evangelist. Where I get my reward is going out and talking to normies who normally wouldn't come to hear me talk. They get the one person in the audience who has never heard what I had to say. So I get my reward there. I think it's just profoundly not a libertarian principle to help people where they need to find a reward. If you're not getting it in the political process, that's great. Find where you're getting it. Bloom where you're planted is another religious saying. I'm blooming where I'm planted, but I'm not going to tell everyone they belong in my pot. And I don't think anyone should tell me I should move to another pot when I am super, super productive. I have created a lot of libertarians. Some of them have stayed in the party, some of them haven't. But I would say if you are an Agora type person, we're driving people to you that might never have heard because we see how the state is suppressing our message. But they have to let the political people speak. And I do not agree that voting is consent. If I'm in an alley and somebody is trying to rape me and I decide that it's in my best interest at the moment to comply, I have not consented to that rape. I have decided it's in my best interest to try to vote for less aggression. That does not mean I am voting for aggression. We do not take that attitude in any other area of life. I will not vote for a candidate who's not a solid libertarian in 99% of the cases. I will in cases where I know they aren't going to win and we need ballot access because of the rigged state system. So I don't believe that voting is consent. I think that whole argument is bullshit. Because what if you voted for somebody else? Did you then consent to that other candidate? We were forced in the system. I might as well say, if you pull over for a cop, you just conceded to the cop's authority. Otherwise, you would have ran away. So I don't think we hold that logic anywhere. I find that one of the simplistic arguments that we should not be using that voting is consent. I think Michael Huemer in his book, The Problem of Political Authority, really dealt with that objection really well. But I'm not trying to convince anyone to do anything different than they already are. I want you to be the best where you're getting your reward. And I don't think our energy is best served by convincing people that they're not happy. I know I am with what I'm doing. And I think I'm effective. And I'll ask you once again, I would love for you to help us become more effective. Because whatever anyone thinks about the New Hampshire Party tweets, the fact is, millions of people got to think about whether or not taxation is slavery over the past couple weeks. And that is something that isn't normally heard. And some people were offended. You want to know what? They're going to hate us anyway. But some people might have cracked open a book from that.
So just to clarify, you don't have to invent some brand new product or be a merchant or whatever to be involved in the Agora. You are involved as a consumer. And so what's really interesting, and I do have a suggestion, if anybody in the room is an app developer, I think we could work together to develop an app that would help you become a better consumer. Now, the thing is, I think there's already one at a website called publicsquare.com. And I hear that promoted on some of the conservative talk shows that are trying to promote a parallel economy. So more broadly, I call that shopping your values. Well, if your value is freedom, you want to patronize, well, you know, if you take this chart, and you find merchants or providers that are providing one of these services, you want to patronize them. And sometimes you would even do that if it was like a little more work, or a little farther away, and it might cost a little more. And like using silver and gold might be a little harder, or Bitcoin, you have to figure out this app and you don't know how to do it. So there is a learning curve. But you know, when you talk about putting your time, money, and energy into the movement, you already believe in this so strongly that you're willing to do that. You're willing to put time, money. So, and I'll give you an example that's very current in people's minds about why shopping your values is powerful, and that would be what I call Bud Light. So Bud Light takes a position which I think they never intended for all this to happen, of course, but they put a unpopular social influencer that was promoting an unpopular distortion of, you know, human sexuality or whatever, and they lost, you know, like, I don't know what however much stock value now, but you know, $30 billion or something. The Bud Light brand is ruined, and then it's happened over and over again to like Target, I think Nike. Who was the one that
Bed Bath and Beyond?
Bed Bath and Beyond. Yeah, so the people out there are ready to shop their values, so you don't have to actually produce it. You can be a consumer and be involved in promoting freedom with your choices in life. And I will grant that there was a Libertarian Party guy that got elected in New Hampshire one time, a guy named Don Gorman, and he was an interesting guy and all that, but one of the things we used to always say is they're not going to let Ron Paul win, and that's because the ruling class actually controls everything about the political parties, the voting machines, the political process. And so in Don Gorman's case, he got him on the ballot because it only required a petition of 2% of the voters in the previous election for that office. You need to get on the ballot. So because he got elected, the parties got involved behind the scenes and passed legislation that said you had to have 4% of the ballot. So in other words, the ruling class is going to keep even a Libertarian Party candidate out. So now, you know, like, don't know where you are on all these different positions on the voting machines, for example, but the voting machines are the companies that manufacture them, the people that program them, they're all under the control of this ruling class set of players, and even how the votes are counted, and how they're picked up and delivered, and how they're printed. In New Hampshire, they had something that was involved how the ballots were folded, and the voting machine saw a shadow and it changed the vote. So it's an unreliable but corrupt process. And you know, you see all this litigation going on. And if the judges are corrupt, they can dismiss a case, things like that. So I agree that going out and trying to convince people of libertarian principles and getting access to those people and bring them into the movement is good. But if you bring them into voting, you bring them into anti-libertarianism. And that's what's bad about doing that. You say, I got all these great principles, but you have to violate these principles in order to win, you know, in order to get to freedom. You have to do an anti-freedom thing. And I think consistency is important. And that's what I actually learned from Tom as well.
Okay, just very, very briefly, we also elected Dick Randolph, and you know, in the 1970s to the Alaska legislature. And I am so sorry because he might be watching, but in Wyoming, we just recently had elected somebody as well. I don't think when people actually, now we're going to have some statists out there who are like, I just don't like the duopoly, and they're going to vote for a candidate, but they were already bought into voting. Once we bring someone into the LP, they realize voting is defensive, and I'm sorry, I don't think that's unprincipled whatsoever, as long as we actually say that. And I know I use my bully pulpit to say that. I use my bully pulpit to say national divorce. I use my bully pulpit to say secession down to the individual. And because I'm the national secretary of the Libertarian Party, even the governor of Colorado is paying attention to what I say. Now he thinks I'm a bit of a barking moonbat, but I am getting attention that I would not get if I was just some normal pink-haired housewife, but that's as normal as I can get, out of Colorado. So I agree with you that I do shop the Agora when there's products that I want. But we talked about personal life reward. Some people might get a lot of reward out of shopping. I'm one of those women who don't unless you choose. But I get my reward, my life purpose out of the opportunities I get through the political process. And as David Nolan said, we're not a political party, we're an anti-political party. And that's what I run under. If you ever consider the anarcho-primitivists, I'm not one of them, but let's say that's something that you believed in. Some of those infiltrate big companies and defense agencies in order to introduce viruses into the computer systems to bring them down. I view the Libertarian Party as the political virus that's getting inserted into the system to bring it down. The fact is, when we get censored by those ballot access things going up, the people start to notice that and they get angry. We don't know what's going to cause the last domino to fall. So I think we should have a lot of fucking dominoes. And it might just be when people start to see how corrupt the system is with things like ballot access and that they don't really have a choice. Like I said in my speech, the fight really isn't about the bathroom toilet. Whatever brings us to more freedom, that has the freedom peaceful revolution, it might seem to be about a 4% ballot access thing, but that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. And the publicity we get in the Libertarian Party puts a lot of straws on that camel's back. And yeah, the state controls the ballot, but you want to know what? There's ways around it in the Agora, but the state also controls the market in a great many ways too. So the same objections that could be put against the system being rigged against us, that we try to subvert, the same thing can be had here. Because they could just go and arrest all you guys. Because they're the ones with the guns. They're the ones with the power, and the elite are evil.
Let me answer that, because that's actually an important part of the analysis. So if you look at the Soviet Union as the most statist and the most all-encompassing power over individuals and commerce and everything, you'd say the state can just arrest all those guys. But here was the interesting thing. In the Soviet Union, the government owned everything, and everybody worked for the government, and so the oppressed had to work in some agency of the government somewhere just to have an income. So what happened was, sort of like now, I was talking earlier about, say, the local police. They have limits to what they're willing to enforce. The public health officer has limits to what he's willing to enforce. The Soviet Union, this tremendous economy developed of how they really survived. So they really wanted, to get their leaky faucet fixed, and they couldn't get the central plumbing agency of the government to come for 6 months. So they knew that so-and-so and such an agency, he knew how to do plumbing, and he had something else he could offer. So there was a barter economy that was developed that was based on favors, because they also didn't have enough money, and they didn't want to get caught with any piece of paperwork that says I owe you this or whatever. So they developed a system called BLAT, which was BLAT, which was a barter system they had to keep in their head, and one guy would approve this guy's paperwork in return for the other guy who's carrying his plumbing. There was also the general economy that developed on the side of the Soviet Union is called the Nalevo economy. That's the left-hand economy. So that meant anything that wasn't, strictly allowed inside the state system. So there was ways for people to, they wanted Western blue jeans, for example, and they wanted to hold their savings in Western dollars. And I don't know exactly how it all went, because, when you're in that economy, they were still able to get blue jeans, and they were able to sell U.S. $20 bills under their mattress and things like that. So the thing about the claim that they can just Bureau of Land Management police that came, and the Bundys were on horseback, and people came from all over the country to support them. And there was this kind of a numerical advantage on the Bundys side, and the BLM people had to back up. Well, it is actually coming to that, you know. There's another famous video, I think it was in Uzbekistan, and there's some kind of, the people are protesting something, and the police essentially get outnumbered, and the protesters end up chasing the police across the plaza. And those kind of things are coming. I'm not advocating any of that. I'm just saying it's going to happen anyway. So what you mentioned was one of the other justifications for voting was defensive voting. And so again, you're still voting for the state. You know, no matter what you vote for, who you vote for, the state wins. What we're advocating as libertarians is the state is not legitimate. It's actually the administrative operation of the ruling class. What we need is to generate our own wealth, our own currencies, and get out of this dependency and the interlocked nature that we're in with the state, with the ruling class corporations.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna let you two guys have the last word on.
Yeah, really quickly. I don't think anyone needs a justification for how they decide to do liberty. If it fits with your principles and you can look yourself in the mirror at night, because that's what's most important, you do you, boo boo. I always thought that should be the theme of the Libertarian Party. But it's true. If I said they could arrest all of you, that was a misstatement on my part. They can maybe arrest a critical mass. But sometimes you take out one person, and that's the dynamic person. But the fact is, you might be having the people that are willing to resist because they came from an evangelist in the Libertarian Party. So I don't think history is all of one piece. I think you need every thread. You pull one thread, and you don't know what everything else. It's the butterfly effect, which all people, most people have heard of. So I'm just trying to be my tiny butterfly wings flapping. And I think I've been effective, and I am sure you have been effective. And I want the different factions to stop saying my way is better. I want us to work together. We are too small. I'm an anarchist, you're an anarchist. You're not a better anarchist than me. I'm not a better one than you. And I'm not going to make the argument like some people have to you where you drive on a government road, thereby you're consenting for that. I don't believe that. Everyone here is somehow paying homage to the state because you're forced to. And you're doing it defensively because you decided it's better to pay that tax than be killed by an IRS agent. And I don't think you're compromising your principles one bit in order to do that. And I don't think you're compromising your principles one bit to defensively vote.
Last word?
Last word?
Yeah, quick last word.
Okay. Well, I'll try to recruit you later. But what the content makes, I only have one copy of the New Libertarian Manifesto, new copy. I'll make that available for sale. I have a couple of copies of the Agorism primer. But anyway, he says there's a lot of possible paths, there's a lot of possible actions we can take, and some of them will work and some of them won't. And he kind of lays out the ones that existed in 74 through 1980 time frame. You know, like there was a guy that wanted to go take over one of the islands in the Bahamas. And so he called that anarcho-Zionism. He says, yeah, that's not going to work. Even the Bahamas has a navy, they'll throw you off the island. So I'm following through on some of Conklin's ideas by promoting a way that actually can make us more prosperous and more free at the same time. Doesn't depend on winning a majority, and I still say you're not going to win in the parliamentary political process because they have too much control. We're going to be the people that innovate and build the future society. So my focus is more on building. What are the new things that we're going to build that will make us free?
Can we end with a hug? Are you a hugger? I'm a hugger.
All right. Great discussion. AnarCon!
Thank you so much.
We don't feel safe with you, though.
I think the great thing we can take away from this is legacy, building a legacy, leaving behind a legacy. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. I'm building one right now.